In 58 BC, Julius Caesar confronted the wild Germanic leader Ariovistus. Through an envoy, Caesar demanded that Ariovistus cease his attacks on the Aedui, a Gallic tribe allied with Rome, and return the Gallic prisoners he held captive. Ariovistus, whose army had spent 14 years away from their homeland, plundering Gaul, commanded a battle-hardened force feared throughout the region. His response to Caesar was resolute. The rules of war are set by the victors. With this defiance, war became inevitable. But before confronting Ariovistus, Caesar was embroiled in another critical conflict, the war against the Helvetii. The Helvetii, an ambitious tribe, sought to leave their confined territory to settle in a more fertile land. In preparation, they burned their own towns and villages, eliminating the possibility of retreat and ensuring their people's full commitment to the conquest. Their ultimate goal was to march against the Aedui, Rome's steadfast allies, and establish dominance over central Gaul. The Aedui tribe were a long-standing allies of Rome and asked Caesar for help. Caesar had a grudge against the Helvetii tribe. Nearly 50 years earlier, the Roman general Cassius suffered a crushing defeat against the Gauls, losing 60,000 men, including Caesar's grandfather. Caesar presented his terms to Divico, the leader of the Helvetii, and said that they had to give captives in order for these terms to be implemented, otherwise they would not trust him. Divico reminded him of his past defeats and said that they were used to taking captives, not giving them. Caesar prepared his army and marched to the battlefield. At Bibracte, Caesar arranging his forces in the renowned triplex aces formation, with his 4 veteran legions at the forefront and auxiliary units strategically positioned on the flanks. To bolster morale, Caesar removed the horses of both himself and his senior commanders, symbolizing that retreat was not an option. The Helvetii advanced in a formidable phalanx, with locked shields and bristling spears. Yet the Romans, positioned on higher ground, unleashed a deadly volley of pila. The Helvetian shields proved inadequate. Roman spears pierced through, forcing many to abandon their defenses and break formation. Exploiting this chaos, the Roman legions charged, their swords cutting through the disorganized enemy ranks. The Helvetii retreated toward a nearby mountain, but their allies, the Boii and Tulingi tribes, launched a flank attack on the Romans, creating a dire situation. The battle raged for hours, but the disciplined Roman legions ultimately prevailed, forcing the Helvetii to retreat to the territory of the Lingones. Caesar sent envoys to the Lingones, warning them that aiding the Helvetii would lead to the same devastating fate. Exhausted and deprived of resources, the Helvetii surrendered. Caesar demanded the tribe's complete disarmament and took several nobles hostage. He then ordered the Helvetii to rebuild their burned villages to prevent Germanic tribes from settling in their lands, thereby securing Rome's strategic interests in the region. Shortly thereafter, Caesar turned his attention to Ariovistus and the Germanic threat. The Aedui and other Gallic tribes, fearful of Ariovistus's oppression, pleaded for Roman intervention. According to Caesar, they fell at his feet, imploring him to save them from the Germans' brutality. Ariovistus's forces, bolstered by 6,000 cavalry and an equal number of infantry, utilized a unique battlefield tactic wherein each cavalryman was paired with a chosen infantryman for mutual support. Some Gallic tribes fought alongside the Romans, but their repeated defeats at the hands of the Germans had instilled deep fear. The Germans were described as colossal warriors, ferocious in battle and merciless to captives. This story soon spread among the Roman legions, and Caesar realized that his own soldiers were also afraid of the Germans. He gathered his soldiers and gave a moving speech, saying that if necessary, he would take the 10th Legion with him and fight alone. The 10th Legion was Caesar's most loyal and bravest unit. They were ready to go anywhere with him. However, this was not necessary. The speech affected the rest of the army, and now all the legions were ready to fight. Still, Caesar did not lose his caution. He resorted to hit-and-run tactics before the battle. His vanguard units were attacking the Germanic units and retreating. In this way, Caesar had the opportunity to measure how brave the Germans could be, and also reduced his own army's fear of the Germans. After these minor skirmishes, Julius Caesar realized that the Germans were not willing to engage in a full-scale war. When he asked his men why, the answer he received was quite surprising. The Germans were deeply superstitious and held great respect for women. The women had declared that going to war before the full moon would render any victory improper and unacceptable. Determined to prevent his troops from retreating, Ariovistus surrounded his camp with wagons full of women and children. This tactic ensured that any Germanic soldiers attempting to flee would have to pass through their own families and created a powerful emotional barrier against retreat. A tactic vividly described by the historian Tacitus.
And what most stimulates their courage is that their squadrons or battalions, instead of being formed by chance or by a fortuitous gathering, are composed of families and clans. Close by them, too, are those dearest to them, so that they hear the shrieks of women, the cries of infants. They are to every man the most sacred witnesses of his bravery. They are his most generous applauders. The soldier brings his wounds to mother and wife, who shrink not from counting or even demanding them, and who administer both food and encouragement to the combatants. Tradition says that armies already wavering and giving way have been rallied by women who, with earnest entreaties and bosoms laid bare, have vividly represented the horrors of captivity, which the Germans fear with such extreme dread on behalf of their women, that the strongest tie by which a state can be bound is the being required to give, among the number of hostages, maidens of noble birth.
The decisive battle soon unfolded. Caesar's legions once again adopted the triplex aces formation and advanced on Ariovistus's forces. The Romans' disciplined attack broke the Germanic left wing, and a cavalry charge led by Publius Crassus shattered their remaining resistance. The Germanic army fled toward the Rhine, leaving Ariovistus's wives and much of his camp behind. Rome had triumphed, but Caesar's ambitions in Gaul were far from fulfilled.